The roar of engines cut through the cold April sky as American pilots pushed their brand-new machines toward occupied France. It was April 8, 1943, the day the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat for the first time. German pilots watched from above, amused by the bulky silhouette climbing into their hunting grounds. To them, it looked less like a sleek predator and more like an oversized jug of milk with wings. They laughed and gave it nicknames: Flying Milk Bottle, Lumbering Cow. Surely, they thought, this clumsy machine would be torn apart in seconds by the sharp claws of the Messerschmitt Bf-109 or the Focke-Wulf FW-190. But what the Germans did not know was that the Thunderbolt was not designed to play their game. It was not built for elegant maneuvers or tight spirals in a turning duel. Instead, it embodied a brutal new philosophy of air combat: mass, power, and sheer destructive force. Beneath its heavy skin sat the mighty Pratt and Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine, turbo-supercharged to deliver crushing performance at high altitude. And inside its wings waited the real surprise: 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, synchronized to spit out 3,400 rounds of lead per mission. The first encounters were rough. American pilots, who tried to turn with the nimble German fighters, found themselves outclassed, outmaneuvered, and often outgunned. Losses mounted quickly, feeding the enemy's confidence. To the Luftwaffe aces, the Thunderbolt seemed to confirm everything they had mocked. Too slow, too heavy, too clumsy. They had no reason yet to fear it. But the P-47 carried secrets the Germans were about to discover. At 30,000 feet, where the thin air robbed German engines of their strength, the Thunderbolt remained strong, its supercharged engine delivering power where few others could. And when it dived, it moved not like a cow, but like a falling hammer, gathering unstoppable speed. A new tactic emerged. American pilots stopped playing the Luftwaffe's game. They avoided dogfights. Instead, they soared high, chose their moment, and then dropped from the sky with the fury of gravity on their side. This was boom and zoom. Each pass lasted only seconds, but in those seconds, the sky became a storm of fire. 8 heavy machine guns poured streams of tracers so dense they seemed like solid lines of light. German pilots, who had once laughed, found themselves flying through walls of lead. Their cockpits shattered, their wings torn apart. The milk bottle, it turned out, carried a bite strong enough to silence even the proudest ace. The Germans still thought they had the measure of this strange American machine. But the Thunderbolt was only beginning to reveal what it could endure, and what it could unleash. The early weeks of Thunderbolt combat were not glorious. Pilots who had trained for tight turns and daring dogfights quickly learned that such maneuvers in a P-47 meant almost certain death. German Bf-109s and FW-190s could twist and climb circles around them, and the Luftwaffe was still brimming with experienced veterans hardened from years of air combat. When Thunderbolts tried to play by German rules, they paid the price in blood. The Luftwaffe mocked the Americans as amateurs flying a clumsy brute, while propaganda boasted of victories over the milk bottle. But what the Germans mistook for weakness was only the beginning of a brutal learning curve. American pilots adapted, studying every inch of their aircraft's strengths and weaknesses. They discovered that the P-47's bulk was not a handicap but a shield. Its rugged construction could absorb punishment that would tear lighter fighters apart. Its radial engine had no fragile coolant lines. It could be riddled with holes and still keep running. And when pilots trusted their altitude, climbing high above the fight, they found the Thunderbolt transformed from prey into hunter. From those lessons came a new way of fighting. The tactic was simple but deadly. Climb, dive, strike, and escape. A Thunderbolt pilot would gain altitude, circle unseen above his enemy, then plunge down like a falling anvil. At more than 500 miles per hour in a dive, the Jug, as its pilots affectionately called it, was nearly untouchable. Its control surfaces stayed steady when others would flutter. At the bottom of the dive, 8.50 caliber Brownings lit up the sky, unleashing a torrent of fire so concentrated that even a single 1-second burst could rip wings from a fighter or leave an engine flaming. Then, before the Germans could react, the Thunderbolt climbed back to safety, ready to strike again. The Luftwaffe was not blind to this change. German pilots who once jeered began warning each other of the Jug's deadly dives. They realized too late that this clumsy cow was teaching the sky a new law. It did not need to dance. It only needed to strike once with overwhelming force. Still, the Germans believed the Jug's bulk and sluggish climb would always keep it second-rate. That illusion shattered on June 26, 1943. Over the skies of Europe, a single Thunderbolt would prove that this aircraft was more than a joke. It could take punishment beyond imagination and still come home. The Luftwaffe would never forget what happened that day, June 26, 1943. The skies over Europe burned with contrails and scattered gunfire as bombers and their escorts clashed with German fighters. Among the American escorting machines flew Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson in his P-47 Thunderbolt. He was young, eager, and still proving himself in a machine the enemy mocked. That day, he would write his name into legend. Johnson's squadron engaged German aircraft, and in the chaos, his Jug became a target. Cannon shells and machine gun bursts slammed into his fighter. Bullets shattered the canopy, riddled the fuselage, and tore into the engine cowling. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the cockpit. He was trapped, bleeding, fighting to control a machine that should already have been falling in flames. Any other fighter of the war, a Spitfire, a Messerschmitt, even an FW-190, would have been ripped apart. But the Thunderbolt, this so-called flying milk bottle, simply refused to die. Then came the true test. A German FW-190 latched onto Johnson's tail. The enemy ace pounced again and again, hammering the crippled Thunderbolt with more cannon shells. Johnson braced for the explosion that never came. Smoke filled the cockpit. Holes punched through the wings. Yet the Jug held together. Each burst of fire seemed to mock the German. The American machine kept flying. Minutes turned into an eternity. The German ace emptied his guns in disbelief, circling his target like a predator, confused by prey that would not fall. At last, out of ammunition, the Germans saluted Johnson before breaking away. The P-47, riddled with hundreds of holes, oil leaking, controls barely responsive, staggered back toward friendly lines. Against all odds, Johnson nursed his battered machine home. When he landed, mechanics counted more than 200 hits on the aircraft. Yet the engine still ran. The pilot still lived. This moment electrified the American squadrons and stunned the Luftwaffe. The Jug was no longer a laughingstock. It was a beast of iron and fire, a fortress in the sky that could take the worst the enemy threw at it and return to fight another day. Johnson's survival was not just personal luck. It was proof that the Thunderbolt's design philosophy was revolutionary. Firepower, altitude, and above all, durability were the weapons of the future. For the Luftwaffe, the message was clear. They were no longer facing fragile opponents. They were facing machines built to endure, flown by pilots who were quickly mastering the art of using them. The days of easy victories were ending, and the Jug was only growing stronger. The legend of the P-47 was forged not only in survival stories, but also in relentless innovation. By late 1943, the aircraft that had once been dismissed as sluggish was beginning to transform. Engineers studied pilot reports, refining the Jug to meet the demands of combat. The most important change came with the introduction of the paddle blade propeller. This simple but powerful improvement gave the Thunderbolt a surge of acceleration and climbing ability. Suddenly, the Jug could not only dive like a meteor, but also claw its way upward with surprising strength. With this upgrade, Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could meet German fighters on far more equal terms. The Luftwaffe had long relied on their ability to climb above their opponents and dictate the battle from superior altitude. Now, the P-47 challenged that advantage, able to reach bomber formations faster, intercept enemy attacks, and then strike with its signature firepower. Equally transformative were the new external fuel tanks, streamlined drop tanks slung beneath the wings. These extended the Jug's range far beyond its original limits. Before, American bombers had often been forced to fly deep into enemy territory with little or no escort, making them easy prey for German fighters. With Thunderbolts carrying drop tanks, the balance shifted. The Jug could now accompany the bombers deep into France and eventually into the heart of Germany itself. The skies began to tell a different story. Where German pilots had once celebrated the bomber streams as hunting grounds, they now faced swarms of heavily armed escorts. A Messerschmitt diving toward a B-17 might suddenly find itself crossing paths with a Thunderbolt, its 8.50 calibers already spitting fire. In seconds, the hunter became the hunted. For the bomber crews, the sight of P-47s holding formation beside them was a lifeline. No longer abandoned at the edge of enemy airspace, they now had guardians that could strike hard and survive the counterattacks. Each mission deepened the Luftwaffe's crisis. To stop the bombers, they had to break through the escorts. But the Jug's toughness and speed made that gamble deadly. By 1944, the P-47 was no longer a curiosity. It was a central weapon of Allied strategy. Its range, power, and firepower allowed it to dominate the skies by day, while at night, Allied bombers and other fighters took their toll. Step by step, the Luftwaffe's confidence eroded. The mocking laughter of 1943 had vanished, replaced by caution and grim respect. But the Thunderbolt was not finished. Beyond the skies, it was preparing to unleash devastation on the ground, turning its guns, bombs, and rockets against the heart of German supply lines. The Luftwaffe would soon learn that the Jug was not only a shield for bombers, but also a hammer for the battlefield itself. By mid-1944, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was no longer just a fighter. It had become the backbone of Allied air superiority, a weapon forged not only in engineering brilliance, but in the vast furnaces of American industry. What the Luftwaffe faced was not a handful of improved aircraft, but a tidal wave of machines and men, produced on a scale Germany could not begin to match. In the United States, factories ran day and night. Skilled workers and assembly lines poured out Thunderbolts in staggering numbers, over 15,000 by the war's end. Each one carried the same promise: 8 heavy machine guns, thick armor, and the power to strike at high altitude. Alongside the aircraft came endless streams of ammunition, spare parts, and trained pilots. America was not just building fighters, it was building an unstoppable system of war. For German pilots, the difference was crushing. They still flew superb machines, the agile Bf-109 and the formidable FW-190, but each loss was a wound that could not be healed. Factories bombed by Allied raids slowed production, and skilled aces were lost faster than they could be replaced. A Luftwaffe pilot who survived his first few missions might soon find himself facing not one or two Thunderbolts, but dozens, each backed by industrial strength that seemed inexhaustible. The Thunderbolt's presence extended beyond the skies. Armed with bombs and rockets, jugs swept down on trains, convoys, and supply depots. German soldiers gave the nickname Jabos to these fighter bombers, and the very sound of their engines triggered fear. Jabo fever, a kind of battlefield terror where men dove for cover at the faintest roar overhead. The ground war and the air war had merged, and the Jug was at the center of both. For the bomber streams heading deep into Germany, the Thunderbolt was a shield. For German supply lines, it was a hammer. Every mission eroded the Luftwaffe's strength. Every destroyed train or convoy starved the front lines of fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. The laughter that had greeted the Jug's arrival in 1943 was gone. Now, German aces whispered warnings. Never underestimate the American Thunderbolt. Even as the Luftwaffe scrambled to introduce new weapons, including the deadly Me-262 jet, the Jug held its own. Pilots adapted, using their durability and firepower to bring down even Germany's most advanced machines. By late 1944, the skies that had once belonged to the Luftwaffe now swarmed with Thunderbolts and their allies. The end was coming, and both sides could feel it. The P-47 had grown from a ridiculed machine into a symbol of industrial power, resilience, and relentless force. And soon, it would help deliver the final blow to Germany's air arm, ensuring that Allied victory in the skies was complete. By the closing months of the war, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had become more than a fighter. It was a force of nature. Across Europe, its shadow marked doom for trains, convoys, and retreating columns. On the ground, German soldiers lived with constant fear of the jabs. The thunder of its engine overhead was enough to scatter men into ditches, even if no attack followed. That was the Thunderbolt's true psychological weapon. Its very presence could paralyze. Reports from the front spoke of Jabo fever, a state where troops froze or fled at the mere sound of approaching aircraft, convinced that the sky itself had turned against them. In the air, the Jug had matured into a master of every role. It could escort bombers at high altitude, duel with enemy fighters, or descend to low level and unleash rockets, bombs, and its infamous 8.50 calibers. In one pass, it could shred armored vehicles, demolish supply depots, and leave smoking wreckage across entire landscapes. Few machines of the Second World War embodied such destructive versatility. The Thunderbolt's story did not end in Europe. In the Pacific, its rugged construction proved equally vital. Japanese flak and fighters could not easily bring it down, and its ability to carry heavy loads of bombs and rockets made it an ideal weapon for the vast island-hopping campaigns. From France to the Philippines, the Jug's reputation grew. A machine that absorbed punishment, hit harder than anything else in the sky, and always seemed to return home. Even as the Luftwaffe introduced jet fighters in a desperate attempt to turn the tide, the Jug remained relevant. With skilled tactics, Thunderbolt pilots even managed to bring down Me-262s, proving that speed alone was not enough to overcome durability, numbers, and overwhelming firepower. By 1945, Germany's skies were no longer battlefields. They were graveyards for the Luftwaffe. After the war, many German pilots who had once laughed at the Jug admitted a grudging respect. They spoke of its terrifying dives, its storm of machine gun fire, and its uncanny ability to survive damage that should have destroyed it. One Luftwaffe leader confessed that it was the Thunderbolt, alongside other American fighters, that broke the spine of German air power. What had begun as a joke ended as a nightmare. The Republic P-47. Thunderbolt stands today as a symbol of what happens when engineering brilliance, tactical adaptation, and industrial might converge. It was never graceful, never elegant, and never meant to be. It was built to endure, to strike, and to dominate. From a ridiculed flying milk bottle to one of the most feared machines of World War II, the Jug's journey was a story of transformation and a reminder that in war, underestimation can be fatal.